You're listening to 15 Minutes of Flame with Robert Phoenix.
Well, good morning. How is everybody? This is Robert Phoenix, running a tad late, an hour and 40 minutes late. I apologize. I was vertically challenged this morning. I've been going to the gym lately. Just started to get back into the gym. And I've been going in the early evening. And I think I just got way too pumped up energetically. And I stayed up kind of late last night. And I got into a late night movie binge. And unfortunately, it did not allow me to rise and shine as early as I like to and do on a daily basis. I apologize for that. And we're here, and that's the important piece at the very least, showing up 90% of the game. So what's going on out there, in there? As always, there's plenty to talk about. I mean, there's always plenty to talk about. I did a variation of this show when Obama was president for a number of years, the entirety of the term, over on Blog Talk Radio. And a lot of those shows are on YouTube if you ever want to listen to an earlier version of this. I used to call this show the Morning Macchiato. The Morning Macchiato. For those of you who are coffee drinkers out there, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I remember when I first started to do this every single day, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this every day. What am I going to be able to talk about? And there was always plenty to talk about. And really, when this show started off, I was really just going to do 15 minutes. And I was just going to try to blitz everything. Just cram it in and then bang, be done. But Jupiter and the Sagittarius in the first house doesn't really allow for that. I don't expect that we'll have a lot of chat in the chat room going on because of the late start today. That's okay, but at least we're getting the show out there off the ground. And for those of you who do follow on YouTube, it will be over there in a very short period of time after this show has ended for today. Well, where do we begin? Why don't we start with the headline of today's show, which is Trump, the walls are closing in, and clearly they are. The latest piece has to do with his doctor. And I think Trump has become a combination of George Bush and Richard Nixon at this point. And when they wanted to go after Richard Nixon, they were not going to rest until they got what they wanted, which was his expulsion from office. And I'm assuming here, again, based on Trump's astrology, with the Saturn opposition, which is going to begin to really kick in for him in 2019, that he may not make it out of 2019. That the long knives are being sharpened. And he's going to have his Caesar moment. At least that's what it appears to look like. Now, a nasty global conflict might preclude his being impeached. That's always the kind of end game that we don't want. Artificially induced crisis so that one man can prolong his political career and prop up his vanity and ego. Speaking of vanity and ego, let's talk about this latest episode, which is truly bizarre. I don't know if you're following this, but Trump has a doctor by the name of Harold Bornstein, which sounds a little like Bronstein. And of course, Lev Bronstein is a famous figure in political history. So Mr. Bornstein, who's a doctor, was just hanging out around his office one day, and in came the White House thugs, led by Keith Schiller, who is Trump's longtime bodyguard, a Trump Organization lawyer. Apparently there's an endless stream of those. And a third man, allegedly, and they pushed into the Park Avenue offices of Harold Bornstein. By the way, if you don't know who Lev Bronstein is, check your history books. Just days before the visit, I'm going to read this. This is from the LA Times. Just days before the visit, Bornstein, an Italian-speaking gastroenterologist with his own shoulder-length locks and funky eyewear, had spilled to the New York Times about his most famous patient, that being Trump. Bornstein slipped to the Times that Trump took Propecia, a medication that stimulates hair growth. 2 days later, the men from Trump, including security head Keith Schiller and attorney Alan Garten, arrived to reclaim all the files Bornstein had on the president. According to the doctor, they spent 25 to 30 minutes hoovering up the original copies of Trump's medical records. Retaliation, he intimated, for speaking to the press. It created a lot of chaos, Bornstein told the network. I feel raped. That's how I feel, the doctor dramatically said. Raped, frightened, and sad. I couldn't believe anybody was making a big deal out of a drug to grow his hair that seemed to be so important. And it certainly is not a breach of medical trust to tell somebody to take Propecia to grow the hair. What's the matter with that? Well, if you're Trump, that's a violation of trust. This is somebody who operates in a fairly bizarre world, I'll have to say, of double standards around secrecy. And it seems to me that everything that has gone on in the Trump administration has had to do with leaks. Whether they're leaks that are behind the scenes or leaks that are in front of the scene, in front of the proscenium. Leaks have been a huge, huge factor in the Trump administration. And then you have Trump on Twitter, using Twitter as a device that was untold before by any president. Now, to be fair, Twitter really came about during the Obama administration. And Obama used Twitter in a very, how should we say this, pasteurized sort of fashion. It's very homogenized. Trump has used Twitter as a weapon. And so there is a high degree of random bursts of communication, often to the detriment of the president himself. And meanwhile, there's enough leaks in the White House to essentially create a dam that is cracking and getting ready to burst, because all of the leaks have led to the integrity of that wall that separates a huge tonnage, a shit ton of water from the rest of the world. You get enough of those cracks, and the edifice of the dam will actually be destroyed, will crumble. Next thing you know, there is a deluge that comes out and is unleashed. That's kind of what's been happening. And in some ways, I have a lot of empathy for Trump, or compassion for Trump. And a lot of people will say, well, he made his own bed. Let him sleep in it. One of Trump's biggest issues is ego and pride. Now, we're going to get into a little astrology here, because Trump has leakage in his chart. He has a Neptune-Mercury square. Neptune-Mercury square. He's got Mercury in Cancer, Neptune in Libra, right? That's a square. That's a square. And when we get into any square you get with Neptune in your chart, you're going to get leakage. Neptune is water. Doesn't matter what sign it's in, it's water. So if it's squaring Venus, you're going to get leakage in relationships. If it's squaring Mars, you're going to get leakage in the expression of your will and your sexuality and your power. If it's squaring the moon, you're going to get leakage in your emotions. If it's squaring Mercury, you're going to get leakage in your communication and your thoughts. Squaring the sun, leakage in your identity. Squaring Saturn, leakage in your relationship to authority and discipline. And squaring Jupiter, just leakage all around. That's big leakage. It impacts and affects everything in the person and probably the rest of the chart. So his pride and his ego with that Leo rising, which is what? Leo is connected to hair, especially on the ascendant. He is a Leo rising, and he was being defensive, Mars, about his ascendant and his appearance hair. He's linked his hair with what most men link their hair to, which is their potency and their virility. And have you looked at Bornstein's hair? It's got a lot of it. Although it's one of those examples of long hair that if you actually had a haircut and took off the locks, you'd have a pretty pathetic hairline. I'll just read this a little bit more here. Trump's New York inner circle often seems stocked with blaring characters tuned into the president's own unique frequencies. There was Sam Nunberg, a fast-gabbing political operative, Omarosa Manigault Newman, a merciless reality television contestant, Michael Cohen, the tough guy lawyer. Unbending loyalty knit them all to the man whose name was plastered on the building. But as Trump's tenure in the White House continues, squeezed by a special prosecutor, low approval ratings, and the legal fallout from his alleged relationship with porn star Stormy Daniels, each of those old guard loyalists has slipped away. Well, he doesn't want Michael Cohen to slip away because Michael Cohen has the keys to the kingdom. They have all the files that Cohen has associated with Trump. So in some ways, they don't really need Michael Cohen. Now, if Cohen was really, really sharp as his buddy, his professional buddy, Alan Dershowitz, Cohen probably would have two separate files going on. There'd be the set of files that, if in case of emergency, would be hidden and tucked away. And then there would be files for if the time came and those files were seized, then they wouldn't offer as much as what was being held in abeyance or reserve. So the walls are closing in on Trump. He's got a meeting coming up with Mueller, and this is where things are going to get real tricky. Real tricky, because Mueller will ask him questions, and if Trump lies under oath, which he'll have to take, then that sets everything in motion for the ultimate grounds of impeachment. And that's where they want to go with all this. They didn't find anything with Russia. The Russia thing was just a way to get in and start rooting around and have enormous resources. There's an endless supply of resources available to Mueller. He can hire anybody. He can hire as many people as he wants. We're paying for Robert Mueller's salary and all the expenses that are being used to depose and then dispatch the President of the United States. We're paying for it all. How does that make you feel? I don't think it's a great feeling, to be quite honest with you. I'm sure there could be other uses for our money that would be much, much better in terms of its application. Look, presidents are dirty. Trump's dirty. Obama, as much as they wanted to create the spotless, unimpeachable, impeccable, sterilized Manchurian candidate, even Obama had a dirty past. Go back and look at his real estate holdings in Chicago with Resco and the deals he got with Resco, which is a realty company in Chicago. There's all kinds of dirt on Obama. Ask anybody, ask any teacher at Columbia if they knew Obama. Ask anybody there if they ever saw him go to college, take a class. The answer is no. Zero. Nobody saw him. Nobody knew him. He was a phantom. His college experience in California, same deal. Was it Occidental? Phantom. Absolute phantom. Well, at least he was part of the law review. We know that. But that was like at the end of the story. He had to have some thread that led him into his public life. He couldn't just be completely anonymous and then pop up in Chicago. Look at how he won his first election in Chicago. He lost. They went back and they redistricted, and they did a recall, redistricted, they had another election, and he won. And I talked about this ad infinitum when he was president, and he was running for the office of senator in Illinois. And he was running against Jack Ryan. And Ryan was the fair-haired Republican, the golden boy, who is going to finally represent the state of Illinois as a Republican. He had all the credentials. He had the looks, he had the credentials, he was rocking and ready to go, and he was going up against this nobody named Obama. And what happened? Well, the tales of his divorce with actress Jerry Ryan went public. Talk about leak. Turns out that Jack Ryan used to like to take Jerry Ryan to swingers parties, eyes wide shut, soirees and get-togethers. And it's amazing who you'll meet. It's not like I hang out at bars all the time. I really don't. If I go, I'll have maybe a drink or two. 3 is usually my limit, but 2 is kind of where I tend to hang. But you meet a lot of people. And one day, at my old watering hole, Jack Allen's, I met a woman who actually knew Jerry Ryan. Her and Jerry Ryan were friends. She went to Jerry Ryan's wedding. That's how well she knew Jerry Ryan. And she told me that Jerry Ryan told her that Jack Ryan was really a homosexual. You get a lot of this in Congress and the Senate. And he was queer. And that she was a beard. And so there was clearly a pattern of aberrance. And I'm not saying that being a homosexual is aberrant, but he, in that situation, like he couldn't own up to it. That's the aberrance. And he wound up going to these Eyed Wide Shut parties, and that's what came out in these stories. I think it was the Chicago Sun-Times, I'm pretty sure. And once that happened and it came out during the race against Obama, he had to withdraw. That guy's life is ruined, shattered. Well, look, you live a double life, that's going to happen. You're setting yourself up to be completely and utterly fragged. So then what happens? Well, they brought in Alan Keyes. Alan Keyes was speaking the truth. He really got into what Obama was and who he was, but nobody wanted to hear it. He was from Maryland. He was not nearly as photogenic as Obama. And he was talking shit about one of their own. Well, theoretically. I mean, Obama wasn't even from Chicago or Illinois, for that matter. Where is he from? No, right? Where is he from? Well, he was born in Nigeria or Kenya, right? He's born in Kenya. Well, maybe. He's born in Hawaii. Well, maybe. I've heard that he was born in Washington State, which is where his mom was originally from. And the family was, they're originally from the Midwest, and they went to Washington State. That's where his mom went to school. I had heard that that's where she had Obama, was Washington State. But the whole thing is clouded in secrecy and mystery. All the records are sealed. Then there's the strange connection and relationship with Donald Young, the choir member who got murdered. Part of the same church that Obama went to. The church that was led by Jeremiah Wright, who preached a gospel at times of separatism and hate under the guise of empowerment. Nobody cared. Nobody cared at all. There was no concerted effort by the right to throw millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars at Obama and his presidency. And people will say, well, that's because the right they take the high road. They were going to let Obama be president because, well, that was the results of the election. Well, that's bullshit. Because when the right wanted to do it to Bill Clinton, they did the exact same thing that they're doing to Donald Trump, to Bill Clinton. And it is a game that is based on psychic and psychological and fiscal extortion. It's an extortion racket. But they left Obama alone because, again, the left and the right conspire to create a type of ideology and governance that serves both interests at a high level, in which case it is a version of top-down totalitarian Marxism. Although I guess if they wanted to go the top-down totalitarian fascistic route, they could do that as well, although that creates more separation in a country that is divided and fragmented and fractalized. I don't think that model works very well. Unless, of course, you want to get heavy-handed and put people on the streets with guns and tanks and start hauling people away, which I'm not sure they want to do because this country is armed to the teeth. Now, if that ever changed, we could see a different kind of scenario unfolding around that. So we're seeing something incredibly unprecedented, and everybody has dirt. George Bush, big time dirt. The guy was a cocaine user, huge, big cokehead. Another closet queer, inviting James Guckert over to the White House. 45 times for overnights. What do you think they're doing? You think they're sitting there and he's teaching James Guckert how to be a press correspondent? No. They're playing bedroom games. James Guckert was an escort. He was a rough trade, military-styled escort. Yeah, professional services. Did that ever come out? No. All the dirt sealed. All the dirt on Obama sealed. But no, not Trump. They went after him full force. Some of it might be astrological with Mars on the ascendant. You're going to have enemies with Mars on the ascendant. You're going to have lots of energy. You're going to have some bravado. You're going to have some, some ego involved, especially in the sign of Leo. But by and large, what was happening and what has happened here with Trump is that they did not want Trump to have any kind of a foothold in terms of the Make America Great Again, because the whole idea here is to bring everybody into a one world government, a one world order. Well, you say, well, how is this going to affect a country like, say, Israel? Well, I don't know. The bottom line is that they'll try to morph it so that they're still in the center of the hurricane, no matter what the form of governance is around the world. And I think they could dually flip-flop and work with just about anybody, as we're seeing down in Parkland, because a lot of the people in Parkland are dual citizens. And a lot of them, have the overt the overt appearance of being what we would call neocons or even Zionists. And what are they doing? Well, they're participating in an active effort to dismantle the Constitution and take away our Second Amendment rights. So it doesn't really matter in a lot of ways. Think of Survivor. You ever watch Survivor? What do people do in Survivor? They flip tribes all the time. Oh, I'm with this tribe until it suits my interest to go to another tribe and then go in and backstab the people. Or, loyalty is a part of Survivor. It's kind of an intrinsic part of Survivor. But it's loyalty with an asterisk. And you have to have people who are loyal to you up to a point. And those people have to be what? Either weak-willed and willing to follow a strong figure, but not too strong, or they're just completely misguided. And they get snookered. So we're seeing the vice grip, right? The anvil press coming in on Trump. The walls are closing in. He's hired Rudy Giuliani, which is interesting because Giuliani is another Gemini. This whole thing is littered with Geminis. Giuliani, Pence, Trump. And again, what's Giuliani going to do? Giuliani, one time the guy was a Democrat, just like Trump was a Democrat at one point, and they flipped. They flipped tribes, just like on Survivor. And Giuliani's like, meeting with Mueller. He's cutting a deal with Mueller because of this whole Stormy Daniels thing. And now it's come out that, yes, indeed, Trump did pay Michael Cohen $150,000 so Stormy Daniels to keep her mouth shut. Is that an impeachable offense? I don't think so. And I'm not here sticking up for Trump because I'm mega. I don't think it's an impeachable offense. Is it something that theoretically lacks character? Well, if character was a litmus for our presidents, you could basically eliminate most everybody except for maybe Reagan. Reagan had a few character issues as it related to his days in Hollywood, being president of the Screen Actors Guild, and some of the deals he made at that time under the Screen Actors Guild. But other than that, Reagan did not have the same skeletons in the closet that the people that followed him did. G.H.W. Bush, Skeletonville. Clinton, Skeletonville. G.W. Bush, Skeletonville. Obama, Skeletonville. They all got skeletons. And Trump probably has, with maybe the exception of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Who knows what that is? You know, did Trump sleep with 15, 16-year-olds? Possibly. Did he watch? Possibly. Is that a terrible thing? It's against the law. Is it against the law on Pedo Island? What are the statutes on Pedo Island? I don't know. I don't know what the law is there. If you go there and you have a relationship with a 15 or 16-year-old, are you breaking the law? I don't know. If I was a lawyer, I'd certainly use that as some kind of case or defense, if indeed it ever came up, because that's what lawyers do. They find loopholes and they exploit them. If that took place in a mansion in upstate New York, well, that'd be against the law. But Pedo Island, who knows what the laws are there? It's a fuggy area. That's fuzzy and foggy, which is kind of what I am today. So again, I'm not sitting here like, you know, being a support column for Trump. I'm just giving you, you know, as clear of a understanding as I have of the situation. And he's being pressed hardcore, big time. And that has just got to take a toll. He's got to take a toll. It's got to take a toll on him psychically, emotionally, physically. Not to mention that you probably have dozens and dozens of covens around the country, you know, firing off curses on every single new moon and full moon in his direction. And you have a bandwidth of hate that is, for the most part, secular. It's not religious or spiritual or dark spiritual for them. It's a secular band of hate going in his direction. That's a huge psychic force. I don't know too many people that could withstand something like that. That either has to, you know, speak to a strength of character or a castle wall of vanity, or perhaps a combination of both. And to be fair, this, whether you like Trump or not, he has not been allowed to be president of the United States since he entered office. Well, then the question is why? Well, it's because he's had a target on his back the entire time. Huge amounts of money coming in. They were going to derail, defuse, anything that they could do to keep the wheels from rolling forward, gaining traction, gaining popularity. His presidency has been undermined from the start. And here's the challenge in some ways to that, is that we talked a little bit about this before Trump actually got elected. It was in the run-up to the election. And there was the interesting case of Brad Pitt going on at that time. And Brad Pitt was going through his legal proceedings with Angelina Jolie, and there was a lot of information and disinformation and misinformation coming out and slogging Brad Pitt and assassinating his character. And, you know, this is what happens when you get into things at a public level. Your shit comes out to the public. No, and, you know, this is what happens. And so Brad Pitt was, in the terminology of the alt-right, being cuckolded. Brad Pitt became the wicker man. And he was thrust into a giant burnable edifice where his public image was, for a time, burned to the ground. Well, Trump is going through the same thing. Trump is the new wicker man. And what does Trump stand for? Trump stands for the old guard. He's an old white guy. He's an old white guy hanging on for dear life, taking Propecia, which is bad for you, by the way. It's really bad. If Trump wanted to deal with his hair, there are a lot of other things you can do. You know, saw palmetto is one of the best things that you can do for your hair. Essentially, there's this DHT, body as man gets older, the DHT count in his body gets higher, and therefore hair loss begins to set in. And you can alter DHT with saw palmetto. You can also use schizonandra and faux tea. These are two very interesting herbs that come from the Far East. I've been taking schizonandra in a powdered form, and I have to tell you, it tastes horrible. It has this weird, pungent, fruity taste, but it's not a good fruity taste. It looks beautiful. It's a beautiful red herb. The color on it's tremendous. The taste not so great. The effects are interesting. I'll have to chime in on those effects. They're good. Anyway, there are things that he could do outside of Propecia. You know, there's that stuff, Propecia, minoxidil. I mean, you go back and you look at like the 90s when the stuff was breaking and hitting the market. It was absolutely terrible for men in terms of their testosterone. It's like their equipment started to shrink, and it's bad stuff. Anyway, he's never had a chance to actually be president. And you'll say, well, he's flawed and he's got all these things, and that's why everybody had him. Every single president had them. But now they're going to make an example of him. They're going to take him out. He is scared shitless. Now, if for some reason, somehow, some way, somewhere, in the midterms, that the Republicans actually cover and carry the midterms, which they might, in spite of what's happened in terms of the lack of leadership and the constant monkey wrench in the works, he has a better chance of making it through. But he's going to be a one-term president. He will not run again. Trust me. It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. All the QAnon fairy tales aside, it's not going to happen. And by the way, if QAnon really wants to save Trump in the presidency, or the white hats behind QAnon, well, you better get your ass in gear and start making some stuff happen. But he becomes an example, right? He's a sacrifice. He's a cultural, generational sacrifice. The last bastion of the white male who could pull himself up by his own bootstraps, which really wasn't the case, and use his privilege, which in some ways was the case, to amass a fortune, which was the case for a while, exploit people along the way, which is not really the case. Everybody exploits people. Trump probably did some, and he probably did less than others. Apparently, he had great relationships with a number of people that worked for him, right? But this is what's going to be sacrificed. He will be the wicker man for a generation. And when that occurs, from a ritualized perspective, something new will come in and replace the model. Obama was supposed to be the replacement. The problem with Obama was that they didn't have another Obama waiting in the wings. That was the problem with Obama. Hillary was no answer. And that speaks to the deficiencies of the Democratic Party. We'll see what they're going to come up with here in 2 years. I just think that people, like we've already seen, yesterday I talked about the disaffected millennials who are moving away from the Democratic Party. Now, are they going to go jump over to the Republicans? No, they're not. They're going to want to be free agents. And they're going to be disaffected Republicans, people who, bought into, the MAGA trip or the MAGA dream, and they're going to look and they're going to say, look, this didn't work. We got to create something different. And maybe there's a synthesis of people coming together that will create something different. And if this is what it takes, then it'll be worth it. Trust me. But it's going to have to be taking kind of the best of both worlds. There's an acupuncturist here in town, and I've been doing trays with the acupuncturist for readings for some treatment with my elbow. We talked about the local politics here, and some of the things that came across my radar screen kind of startling. Like they spray Roundup everywhere, all over the city. I just found out. In fact, I was walking out of my apartment, and one of the grounds guys is spraying Roundup everywhere. Well, that guy needs to know. Next time I see him, I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to say, you know what you're spraying? This stuff has an intense impact on your health. And I'll bring the bullet points without overwhelming him. And when he sprays that stuff, he'll think twice about it. And then I'll go to another level. I'll go to the level here at the complex, and I'll go a level above to them. But basically what was being laid out is that this town is incapable of actually incorporating some interesting change. Like, it's got fluoride in the water. Well, let's defluoridate the water. Interesting story. Huge push to defluoridate Austin. And they had a big town meeting. Huge town meeting. I mean, the place was bursting at the seams. You had people on the left, you had people on the right. And they were there to defluoridate Austin. And guess what happened? It didn't happen. They voted to keep the fluoride in. 5 people. Isn't that what it is? 5 or 7 people, usually? Man. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that there is room. There is room for taking ideas from both sides, the best ideas from both sides. Being environmentally friendly, environmentally conscious, which is something that the left and the progressives have beaten their drum for years, even though it's kind of morphed into this global warming, fairy tale, which it is. It's a fairy tale. But there are things about that relationship with the environment that are really important, and we need to have that, right? That needs to be a part of this moving forward. At one point in time, the left actually stood for the American worker. That's got to be a part of it. On the right, we've got to have fiscal oversight. We've got to have more of a sense of independence and people doing things for themselves. And in both areas, the convergence needs to be medicine and wellness and moving away from corporate medicine, corporate agriculture. You get people that are willing to agree on 7 out of 10 major talking points, and you got a new party that could challenge the ancient, archaic, fossilized systems and duopoly of the past. That's what we need. Now, of course, there'll be some Pied Piper just sitting there waiting. Hey, come on over here. We'll do this. We'll create this. The next thing it becomes watered down, denatured, and it morphs into some version of the left, or I don't know. That's the cynic in me. Let's see who's in the chat room who bothered to stop by. There's Susan. Good morning. I get to listen live. And Cheryl, DMP show never ends. Ugly people for the show. Anyway. All right, let's get on out of here. It's a little late in the day. Things I need to do, things you need to do. Just remember, there is a role for you in this world. And the role for you can be right where you live. Pay attention. Look around you. See where you can make a difference. And I mean that wholeheartedly. All right. Use your head to discern what's really your heart to see what's possible.
You're listening to 15 Minutes of Flame with Robert Phoenix.